Allow me to introduce our renowned moderator for today, Mehdi Hassan. Mehdi is an award-winning British journalist, a broadcaster, author, political commentator. He's presenter of both Upfront, filmed here in the United States in Washington, D.C., and Head to Head, filmed in the Oxford Union. He's a senior contributor at the Intercept and host of the Intercept's Deconstructed podcast. He's been named one of the 100 most influential Britons on Twitter, and is included annually in the global list of the 500 most influential Muslims in the world. And you must catch his show tomorrow night where he interviews Eric Prince on human rights violations in Iraq. Thank you. Mehdi.
Dalia, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure, privilege to be here with you all. It's been described by the United Nations, as you know, as the world's worst humanitarian crisis. Not Syria, not the Horn of Africa, not Burma, but of course, as you well know, Yemen, the poorest country in the Arab world, currently blockaded, besieged, bombed by some of the richest countries in the Arab world. Many of you here know the stats: tens of thousands of people killed, maybe more than 100,000 wounded, more than 2 million people displaced from their homes, a record 1.2 million cases of cholera, 10 million Yemenis just one step away from famine. 24 million Yemenis, more than 4/5 of the population in need of food, aid, or protection, according to the United Nations. Is it any wonder then that a senior UN humanitarian official said last year, and I quote, "The situation in Yemen today to the population looks like the apocalypse." The apocalypse. But here's a statistic you may not have seen. And as a journalist who's tried to raise awareness about Yemen in my own media organizations, it's a statistic that fills me both with anger and with shame. Last summer, the US media monitoring group FAIR pointed out that on MSNBC, one of America's top cable news channels, liberal progressive news channel, the US-backed Saudi-led war in Yemen had not been mentioned for an entire year. For 12 months straight. 0 news segments on the US-Saudi war in Yemen, and in that same time period, 455 news stories on Stormy Daniels. There's your point of comparison. Just this past week, we had a new report out from a coalition of US and Yemeni human rights groups, which found that American and British-made bombs may have killed or injured nearly 1,000 Yemeni civilians, including women and children. 122 children killed by US or UK-made bombs in Yemen. Will that get any traction, any major coverage here in the US, or will the media continue to just obsess over the latest tweet by Ilhan Omar on the subject of Israel? That seems to be the only story in town right now, until the next crazy Trump tweet. But will Yemen ever get a look in? Is it any wonder that Amnesty International and others have dubbed the conflict in Yemen the forgotten war, a conflict that we have averted our eyes away from? Our collective indifference, and I say this as a journalist, has been both a travesty and a tragedy. So I want to thank both the Tawakkol Karman Foundation and the Center on National Security here at Fordham Law for hosting this global conference, for casting a much-needed expert spotlight on an underreported, under-discussed, under-examined, but brutal, murderous, and seemingly never-ending conflict. And so without any further ado, let's get into today's discussion, which is on the prospects for peace, on the prospects for justice in Yemen.